So in the Star Trek fandom, there is the question frequently asked, which is your favorite captain, Kirk or Picard? Now, I have never been one to choose. I liked Star Trek when I first encountered it as a kid, when Captain Kirk was a captain of the USS Enterprise, and I also fell in love with Captain Picard later in my adolescence when I would watch Next Generation with my family. However, today, after watching Star Trek Picard, I am going to get off the fence. I'm going to walk up to that line in the sand and stand on the Picard side. Jean-Luc Picard is the moral superhero of the Star Trek universe in general, in Next Generation and in Star Trek Picard. Welcome, folks. This is Joe from joeThinks Art, and I have a huge disclaimer for you. I have not watched Star Trek Picard, and I'm going to talk about it. And if you have not seen it, you may want to stop this video, go watch it, and then come back and watch this. Or maybe, I don't know, I've done it. Mute the video, you know. You don't want to spoil it for yourself. Or you can just go ahead and spoil it for yourself. Now, for me, Star Trek is a story about spreading peace across the galaxy, about the different species coming together and finding a way to live in harmony at the galactic level, where Earth has achieved a utopian society. There is no more currency. Humanity has united and risen together to reach for the stars and helped form Starfleet, an alliance of different species at the galactic level. Now, although there's war and conflict and things like that out at this particular level as well, often conflict seeks them out. They don't seek conflict out. The overall concept behind a lot of the storytelling, though, specifically in Star Trek The Next Generation and all of the spin-off shows that came afterwards, is it's very intellectually challenging. There's logic and reasoning behind things. I also like often how Star Trek tries to take concepts that we deal with politically or socially in our current time frame, even though for a lot of Next Generation I'm talking about the 90s. But I look forward to seeing more of that. The whole concept is Star Trek is about a logical interplay between people and resources and needs out in space. It's like a giant jigsaw puzzle that makes one think. And Picard kind of embodies the entire thing of an ideal person in an ideal future. Or if Star Trek Picard suggests maybe Starfleet isn't so utopian, maybe it's starting to fall inward and collapse in a little bit, socially, if you know what I'm saying. But for me, Star Trek was always the concept of an ideal future where people work together for a greater good. And basic needs were a thing of the past. They don't need money, they can just create things. They have replicators. So Star Trek was about logic. It was about using your wits and your brains and resources you had at your disposal to overcome specific obstacles because they were way out in space. And they only had what they had to be able to accomplish what they needed to do. So they had to kind of think outside of the box when it came to resources or how to interact with the world around them in some way, shape, or form to accomplish their goals. And all the basic necessities are already taken care of because, again, this is like an ideal future where you're not worried about wars and stuff like that back home. The wars are happening far away, although to be fair, the wars in Star Trek, if something happens to your home, it's usually devastating at a planetary level. So the internet for years has been rife with Star Trek memes, Captain Kirk versus Captain Picard. And earlier I had mentioned Kirk versus Picard. And it seems almost as if we're at this whole hey boomer versus hey millennial thing. But me personally, I've always taken the approach to this that I take with most things, that a side must be chosen. I choose no side and I back away from the decision if I can, or it logically makes sense to do so. In this case, I sat down and thought about it, and the whole reason that I've been on the fence is merely because Kirk was the first captain for me. It's kind of like Doctor Who. You don't forget your first Doctor. You generally love the current Doctor, and you have your opinion about all those in between. You know what I'm saying? I personally am a pretty neutral person. But now in this particular debate of Picard versus Kirk, I have to say that I choose Picard, hands down, to the level that I admire him as a superhero. So let's think about this. Now, both captains got to pilot a humongous exploration-class ship with tons of people and resources at their disposal. They encountered some pretty odd, some pretty bizarre, weird out there stuff. But I have to say, even though Captain Kirk was my first, he was not a moral champion. I can think of many times his sly nature proved to be useful. Even if morals didn't win the day, they returned to the crew and the ship, you know what I'm saying. Picard, however, is a moral champion to the point of being a superhero. And think of all the diplomatic approaches that he took through repeatedly encountering the Romulans. I mean, in Star Trek Picard, he has a couple Romulans living with him, helping take care of his facility, I'm sure, and him. I don't yet know their names. And his superpower is the way that he can talk himself out of trouble by taking a moral high ground and defending it. His ability to say a speech to move something or a group of people is amazing. All throughout his career as captain throughout Next Generation, it was truly his impeccable sense of moral fairness that really won the day over and over again, and his strong belief in the Prime Directive that they shouldn't interfere with lesser species, and that all sentient life should be studied and has the right to live. Very similar to the Doctor from Doctor Who. Specifically relating to Star Trek Picard, I like to see civil and social changes happening too. Older actors are being kicked out of the acting industry. Look at Picard in general. All the actors from Next Generation coming back. Then again, my wife brought up Expendables. Many of the old action actors are finding new places and screens and hearts. This is different. The elderly or older didn't get to do this in the past, just like all the women actors, well, actresses, all the time that they're getting on the screens and silver screen. It's about time. I like and have to draw the comparison of the world that Star Trek Picard takes place in, where it appears that the Federation has withdrawn. They say some bad things about Romulans, and I see a very moral comparison of what's happening there in this story to what's happening now in our political world here in the United States, specifically the Democrat versus Republican endless debate that happens here with no other opinions being thrown into the hat. For me, it's almost like seeing the fall of the future. Starfleet represented a utopian future to me, and now I'm seeing in this story it as its own separate antagonist. Now, although Data is gone, and Data, the android from Star Trek Next Generation, was one of my favorite characters, and I'm sure yours and many other people's too, Jean-Luc begins this quest once he finds Data's daughter to help her and then ultimately find her sister, because there's two of them. Do they contain the key to bringing Data back? Maybe he was downloaded into them as well, like before. Is Data back, and that's who built them? Did he build them before or after the events that led to his demise? There are so many questions the first episode doesn't answer. It's also interesting that Picard takes on finding these girls as almost like a law of surprise-like quest. Yes, I'm referring again back to The Witcher, but the law of surprise goes outside of just The Witcher. We did some research and it's a thing. If someone saved your life back in the old days and you had nothing to repay them with, you would offer them the law of surprise. which is the next time they had a big surprise, that surprise was actually yours, not theirs, and that was the repayment. In The Witcher, it just so happens the surprise was a daughter. You know what I'm saying? And in this, it's a surprise, Picard. Data built 2 girls, or somehow manufactured them or made them. Maybe legitimately birthed them? Oh, there's just so much. We'll have to wait and see. Now about this piece of art specifically, I chose to do something very different. I've been testing a lot of different things, getting ready for the work I'm going to do on Shin's Odyssey, and I decided to continue through with what I've been working through with some of my stuff. So I kept to that style, and I used the selector tool to kind of do cutouts, and although I don't stick exclusively to any one specific method, the whole idea is the transitionary lines on the outside don't get as much detail as what's going on inside of each specific area. So you watched the video to the end, and I'm going to assume that you watched Star Trek Picard now too. So I have a question for you. What was your favorite scene? I specifically liked the interview that I brought up in this video. And also, did you see the little 8-minute Children of Mars short that kind of makes this episode make more sense? Well, thanks for watching, and if you liked this, please hit the like button, and I'll make more content like this. And if you haven't, subscribe and hit that notification bell, and you will get notified every time I release a new video, which are released on Sundays. We should all be moral superheroes, and be kind to one another, and use our turn signals.